Welcome back to Comic Book History, episode number 79. And you're probably thinking, Nick, what are you viewing this time for this one? What character are you talking about for this show? I am talking about Namor the Sub-Mariner. Yes, a character is created by the late Bill Everett and who actually made, well, an unpublished story that was later printed in. It was a comic called Motion Pictures Funny Weekly, a comic book that was never released. Yeah, well, it wasn't published anyways, but they did publish the story for this one in Marvel Comics number 1. Yeah, Namor the Submariner, a character who is an Atlantean, not whatever the heck they basically made in the movie, where he is basically connected to the Mayans. I have no idea what they changed this for. It's weird. Now, in this Dave here, his artwork is kind of weird. Now, you might be curious. Have you read a lot of Namor comics? Not really, per se. Now, Namor himself, when he first showed up, his story was okay, just him basically surrounded by some area. Now, mostly plays takes directly to Atlantis, and during the World War II era, he does participate in World War II, mostly the side of the Allies. Though they explain the Mara Project, he's basically joined the Allies because of the U-Man, an Atlantean who actually hates him and wants to overthrow his people in order for him to become the ruler. Yeah, you can kind of see U-Man as, simply put, basically the World War II equivalent of basically another villain, which I'll get to in a minute. So, Namor himself, I believe in issue 5, I believe was, had participated in the very first comic book crossover where he had basically a one-shot story fight with the Human Torch, Jim Hammond, which they reference in the Marvel projects. The Marvel's project. Yep. And, well, they later had, he mostly just appeared in the 40s where he basically was mostly appearing in Marvel Comics, and then later on changed to issue 2 to Marvel Mystery Comics. Then, of course, he got his own solo book called Submariner Comics, which lasted for 33 issues. In the case of Marvel Mystery Comics, he was there from issue 1 up into issue numbered like 92, before it was retitled to Marvel Tales. That became sort of a horror type of story. Yeah, then by the late 40s, because comics losing popularity at that point, they discontinued this comic, but they did attempt to briefly bring it back in the around the mid 1950s, where he appeared for a few issues of Young Men, and he also appeared in Men's Ventures, and he also appeared in a brief revival of his own solo book, alongside Captain America, obviously. And then pretty much after that, nothing for almost 10 years, until he popped up in issue 3 of Fantastic Four, where Stan Lee brought the character back as a recurring character book, who basically constantly recurring in the book for many years. Before I continue here, I should basically explain some retcons that made to the character that was made later on. Take, for example, the fact he was actually a founding member of the Invaders. Yes, thanks to Roy Thomas, a guy who basically wrote Namor exclusively in the 70s. He basically has established in a retcon that he was part of a group known as the Invaders, comprised of himself, Namor, Captain America, Bucky Barnes, the Human Torch, and Toro. That was your lineup. And fun fact about Namor the Submariner: did you know he was actually part of Marvel's original Big Three, which is comprised of Captain America, Namor himself, and the Human Torch? By the 60s, he replaced him and Human Torch replaced with Iron Man and Thor as Marvel's Big Three. Why in the world they decided to replace those two with basically Iron Man and Thor? Because Stan Lee. Yep, so they came together because of an attack on Winston Churchill in Virginia. So they said, come together and fight the Axis. Okay. And they had a very, very high profile comic book, which lasted 41 issues, and fought a guy called, well, the guy who became Dr. Nemesis for the X-Men, who appeared in the second volume for Invaders. And also this period of time was established in a retcon miniseries called simply Namor. It was like about 4 or 5 issues, where prior to the break of World War II, he was in a brief relationship with a surface woman. Yes. Yes, he was. Yes, and after the war wrapped up, he was part of the All Winter Squad. Now, the All Winter Squad was basically a group he was part of. Now, that group was basically a merger of basically the Invaders and the Liberty Legion, basically as a post wartime operation, and they fought an early version of the Chameleon. No, not the Marvel Spider-Man villain. No, no, no. Not the Spider-Man villain. It's basically a different character. And they only initially appeared just for had two appearances back in the late 40s. That basically they first appeared in All Winter Squadrons number 19, and they also had a 21st issue. 20 was a romance issue. Yep. Yeah, it's called All Winners Comics. That's basically they appeared in. And this group themselves, I probably will discuss this group at a later point when it comes to the All Winter Squadron. Yes, and then afterwards, and they have the 50 stuff, obviously, and then with the 60s, basically, with him being more established in the 60s, they have him basically like where finds some people, fights the Avengers, and I don't think he fights, he does appear in the X Men comic Spirit time as a guest star. Also, at one point, he forms his friendship with the Hulk, which basically continues to this very day. Even that later led to the formation of the Defenders with him. And mostly for the 60s, he had one original villain that period of time. That was Tuma, who was basically his recurring villain for some time. Now, he is one of only two villains for Namor who is not a creation of Roy Thomas. Because Roy Thomas practically gave this man a rogues gallery. Yep, and then pretty much after he was appearing Fantastic Four for some period of time, he eventually got his own solo book. Well, he mostly appeared as a co-feature in the book Tales to Astonish. Starting with issue, I think it was like issue 70, and he was in the book up until issue 101. Well, that's because the book was retitled to cover Hulk 1 or 2. He, of course, got his own brief backup story. He basically had a team of one shot with Iron Man, where it was two stories, one for Namor, one for Iron Man. And then eventually he got his own solo book finally. This was actually his second ongoing series ever to date. This lasted for approximately about 72 issues. And in this series, we got introduced to Tiger Shark. Yes, Tiger Shark. The best way to describe this guy is that he's simply Marvel's version of Black Manta. I am not kidding about that. He is literally Black Manta from Marvel Comics Universe. And Atuma is Marvel's counterpart to Ocean Master. Except he's more of a generic villain than basically that. These two are the most prominent villains in Namor's Rogues Gallery when it comes to all of his villains. Yeah, these are your other villains for Namor the Sub-Mariner. You have Byrith, who basically appeared, who was part of it was another species of that one, the same thing in that one. Paul Destine was part of the Serpent Crown story. Yeah, he is a creation of Roy Thomas, obviously. Obviously Doctor Doom. The Griffin, who is a Steve Englehart character. Quadra Crusader, he's basically a Atlantean who's evil. He only appeared a few times over the years. He's a Roy Thomas character. Yep. Let's see, there's Warlord Krang, which I believe this guy is still very much alive. Yeah, he is. I'll get to more. You have Namor the Chorus. Yeah. There's also, obviously, Tiger Shark, who appears to 5. There's Orca, 23, who's also later part of the Heroes for Hire. A character known as the Piranha. He's actually one of a few. He's another character who is not created by Roy Thomas. He created Marv Wolfman, people. Yes, Marv Wolfman. There is also the Plant Man. No, seriously, there's a character known as the Plant Man, and he was a character who was created by Stan Lee. He was actually the only character Stan Lee created. There is, of course, the Pup Master, another Stan Lee character, Set. Or a Marv version of the character, Set. Tyrant, and the U-Man. And he first appeared in Vegas number 3. Yes. There was also a female villain. He also later fought Lyra, and this woman basically is connected to him in a very different way. There is also Magneto, Master Khan, who is a foe of Iron Fist and Luke Cage. Yes. There is Morgan Le Fay, Naga, first issue 9. And that's it. Yes. These are his supporting characters. Andromeda, Lady Dorma, who was actually Namor's first wife. Namor his cousin. There's a couple of different versions of this character. One basically was close with, the other was sort of her daughter who became part of New Warriors. At one point, these two wanted to start a relationship, but the elders basically really were forcing the matter, so they decided not to. Yeah, Namor kissing his own beautiful cousin. There is Neptune. Yes, Neptune. There's also the character Stingray. Yes, Stingray, who is an old friend of his who actually was briefly part of the Avengers. Yes. Most of the supporting character. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's also this creature known as Giganto, who, well, was a crazy, who was basically constantly with Namor himself, obviously. Mm-hmm. He had this book publishing for, like I said, for 72 issues, mostly by Marv Wolfman. Well, mostly Roy Thomas and later by Marv Wolfman. Though he did a brief substance. Now, normally when you see Namor, you look up Namor, his look is simply him wearing a green Speedo and having wings. That is seriously the man's look. There was a brief period of time where he adapted a outfit where it's like almost like armor, and inside of the armor contained water, because basically he's a water character. He has to be near water all the time to basically maintain his strength. It's kind of a weakness of his, and it's a simple weakness to Aquaman, mostly. Now, the difference between Namor and Aquaman is Namor is more arrogant than Aquaman is. Aquaman is a guy who purely have fun. He's very serious, but he's more having fun. But Namor is super serious, and a lot of the time he would frequently have wars with the surface world a lot of the time. Yep. And during the 70s, while his own book was going on, he was basically briefly part of the Defenders. He was part of the group for the initial first 3 appearances in Marvel Feature, and he was part of the book heavily during the first 14 issues of the book before he left due to differences with Doctor Strange. So he came back several times afterwards, and he later, of course, well, was part of the second volume for Invaders, along with the third, fourth, and, well, the only volume he skipped was the Bendis volume, but mostly he was part of this group along with the Invaders. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, once this book wrapped up, he later became part of the Strange Tales comic book, while still also appearing in, occasionally appearing in Fantastic Four, or later on by the 80s, he became part of the Avengers. He also a couple limited series at this point in time. One is basically Saga of Sub-Mariner, and the other one, I think, is like Namor the Savage, I think it was. Yes. But the 80s was kind of an odd time for him. He didn't have much of an ongoing series at that point in time. And then by the 1990s, basically, he was finished with the Avengers at that point, he got another solo book. This time by John Byrne. Yes, called simply Namor The Sub-Mariner. Yes. Seriously, that's the name of the book. It was mostly done by John Byrne. Yep, John Byrne. Oh, there was one comic I almost forgot to mention here before I continue here. It was Superman Team Up, which, like in the case of Defenders, it was mostly, well, first started as 2 giant-sized books, and then eventually got a very brief ongoing series, which lasted for 16 issues. Issue 15 was a reprint, but the first 14 issues simply were a team-up story of Namor, and actually he was there for the first 13 issues, because 14 Doctor Doom teamed with Magneto, 16 was teamed between the Hate Monger, and I believe the other one was Arm Zola, I believe it was, or at least Red Skull. Yeah. But yeah, he later got his own book, basically by John Byrne. Lasted for 60 issues, had a few annuals, and then by the late 1990s, he was basically sporadically appearing at that point. He helped, thanks to a company formed called Oracle, he found a new version of the Heroes for Hire. And then he disappeared. Mainly due to what was going on in this comic at that point in time. Though during the final issues, they were basically wrapped up in some part of the story called Atlantis right called I think it was like Atlantis Rising. I think it was. He also was part of the Atlantis Attacks crossover. Yep. Then of course by the 2000s, of course he had that miniseries Namor, and then he didn't do a lot after that. Well, still occasionally appearing in Fantastic Four. He didn't do a lot per se. I mean, if you want to think anything high profile he appeared in, well, I think he did appear a few times in Captain America, of course, Marvel Projects, obviously. Now, when the Avengers were started to begin in the mid 2000s, under Bendis, was he ever considered to be a potential member of the team? Nope, never was. He never joined the Avengers period of time. As a matter of fact, the first team he rejoined was the Defenders. Actually, no. He basically, by 2009, he joined the X-Men. Yes, Namor the Sub-Mariner joined the X-Men. Because it was discovered he is in fact a mutant, thanks to a retcon flashback where apparently he attempted to have a one-night stand with Emma Frost, and then the Sentinels showed up. Yes, the Sentinels clarified that Namor is mutant. Namor, not liking the fact that a bunch of robots interrupted him when he's about to have his own pleasure time with a woman he likes, he proceeds to basically wreck the crap out of these things. Yes, Namor easily beats the Sentinels. Really easily. So, he is recruited part of the X-Men, and he is part of the team from about 2009 to about 2012. And during this period of time, he did briefly get a brand new ongoing series called Namor the First Mutant, where, during this period of time, Atlantis, which was basically briefly off Norway, and also, I almost forgot to mention, in 2006, we had this thing where after Civil War happened, Namor decided to attack New York City. So Iron Man's response to it, nuke Atlantis, destroying the city again. Though the city was built not long afterwards. Actually, a few years later. Then, of course, Atlantis moved out west coast and became basically the new home was a giant pillar they lived in. The pillar itself had two purposes. Number one, to keep the island nation of Utopia afloat, and number two, serve as the home to the Atlanteans. Yes, Namor got his ongoing series thanks to the across the known as Curse of the Mutants, which involved vampires, and his book didn't last very long. Right after the tie-ins wrapped up, book was canceled by issue 11. And no new book was given for him afterwards. Nope, it took him till recently, I think it was just announced he's getting a new ongoing series. And after 2012, he didn't do a lot at all. He was not ready to rejoin the X-Men period. He did rejoin the X-Men in about 2021 per se, about a decade. Actually, he did briefly join the X-Men first for X-Men Red, and then returned Reach recently. But what did he do after he left the X-Men? Well, he became part of the Defenders, the Matt Fraction version. He also, let's see, I'm trying to think what else he did. He didn't do a lot per se. Also, he did make a brief guest appearance in the pages of Black Panther due to their close relation they had over the years. Oh, almost forgot to mention here. He was briefly married a second time to an alien named Marvarn, I think her name is. And during the Dark Reign crossover, prior to that, she was killed, and basically Norman Osborn resurrected her into a fish monster. Namor had the mercy kill his own wife. Oh yeah, and it's also revealed that these two had kids together. Yep. Though it was been suggested for years that Namor was sterile until the Submariner series released in 2006, where oh yes, he had a son who died at the end of the miniseries. And Namor to give a crap because he said, "You want Atlantis so badly? I'll chain you to my throne and have my old arch enemy Iron Man basically wreck the place." Yes. Yeah. So you could say he was part of some groups like Defenders. He rejoined the Invaders a couple times, for all the new invaders, and of course the Chip Zdarsky, which was really good. But he's still somewhat active per se, but not as bigly active as he was over the years. Now, of course, whenever he's had an ongoing series, he's enjoyed great writers. I've read the Namor the First Mutant series. It's actually not that bad. It's a series that shockingly was canceled in only 11 issues. Probably due to low sales, but this, out of the four ongoing series for Namor the Sub-Mariner, this was the shortest one ever published. The longest was the Roy Thomas run, 72 issues. The one from the 90s, that was the second longest. Third longest was the classic one from the 40s. And he also would, during the 60s, appearing in Fantastic Four and Avengers, he would also make guest appearances in books like Spider-Man. Appeared over the years, aside appearing in his regular books and Avengers, Fantastic Four, he also made guest appearance pages of Daredevil, Amazing Spider-Man, the Hulk, which, by the way, his book, issue 22, served as a part one of a three-part, was actually part two of a three-part backdoor pilot into a, basically it was meant to serve as a wrap-up of the Doctor Strange series, which was canceled at the point in time, because Roy Thomas wrote both books. He had to have issue 22 of the book basically have Namor wrap up basically Doctor Strange's own plot thread, and then that story was wrapped up in 126 for Incredible Hulk. But yeah, not much else to say about Namor. Great character. I kind of wish Marvel utilized it a little more. Oh, I almost forgot to mention this. You might be thinking, wait, Nick, did you forget to talk about this? It happened right after Secret Wars. Well, yes, he's also part of the Illuminati. Yes, Mars worked Illuminati with Professor Charles Xavier, Black Bolt, Mr. Fantastic. Basically, Marvel's best minds. Later on, Black Panther and Captain America joined the team, along with people like Beast, Giant Man, Captain Britain, became part of Illuminati, and their purpose was basically the whole thing with the incursions, which led to Secret Wars. And after Secret Wars wrapped up, the first thing the right Marvel decided to do, have James Robinson have him get killed by Hyperion in the first issue of Squadron Supreme, and then by the end of the series, get revived. Oh, and by the way, this death was actually leaked prior to the first issue came out. No idea why Marvel did that before, but it's like, hey, let's leak the fact that that Namor is gonna get beheaded by Hyperion in the first issue of Squadron Supreme by James Robinson, which of course they undid by the end of the series. Yeah. But it's almost like in the case of Death of Namor, nothing was really accomplished with that aside from taking off of the board for a year. He had one of the more shorter death periods that Marvel's had. If you want to think of the shortest, it's probably Black Widow. She was dead for a month before they revived her as a clone. Yep. At least with Namor, they used Time Travel to bring him back. Yep. But not much else to say about Namor. And I'm pretty much going to end it here because I had nothing else to talk about for Namor. If anybody else think I missed something for Namor, please let us in the comments below. Okay, so that's the particular review. Stay tuned. Well, I don't think I have any more videos planned for tonight. I'll probably just save maybe one for tomorrow. Who knows what's going to be? You'll find out tomorrow. Okay, next video. Bye.